Hi everyone, I hope you're doing super well because I am not. In fact, today's episode is going to focus on what is by far the most disturbing pest to me. I'm talking about soil mites, and they happen to be attacking one of my favorite plants. I'm going to tell you all about them, how to get rid of them, and what we're going to do with this baby right now. Alrighty, if you are unfamiliar with soil mites, you are not alone because I was very unfamiliar with them too, even though I had two other encounters over the past 4 years with them, just not knowing exactly what they are. But they are these little arthropod, tiny mites that appear in soil once it's too damp and moist and stays that way. There is debate whether or not they're harmful to plants. Most people say no. Some say kind of, just depends. Mostly outdoor plants. What they like to do is they emerge in that soil and they like to feed on decomposing matter like orchid bark or dead leaves. And do you know what is in the soil mixture of a lot of my plants? Orchid bark. That's because a lot of my plants are aroids. They fall under the Eraceae family, like your philodendron, your monstera, your pothos, all of the above. And aroids really love a chunky soil mix, which includes things like orchid bark. It helps make their roots move around easier, and it's more breathable space. But with that, my friends, comes a terrible pest, and it is indeed soil mites. And I happen to notice them on my philodendron Jose Bono, which is right over there in my bedroom. I had it isolated away for a while, but now it's just sitting in a middle spot away from other plants. It's fine now, but let's just go grab it because that's the only way that we're going to get this done and taken care of once and for all. And my gosh, I can't believe that they came after one of my babies, one of my favorite plants. Look at how beautiful those leaves are, especially that new one. It's all variegated and so beautiful. But alas, pests like soil mites don't care how beautiful your plant is. They are just selfish, greedy, and they should all die, which I did kill them all. It was a very painful death, too, by the way. I'm going to tell you all about it. And I do not, it doesn't bother me one bit that it was painful for them because the pain that they caused to me and my beautiful plant, they deserved it. All right, so first things first, I'm going to tell you about how I ended up finding this because, as you know, I am obsessive with my plants. What? You say? You guys know. And I'm constantly checking on them, which anybody with a large plant collection should do. You should check on your plants, look at their foliage, just look at their soil, see if anything just seems out of the ordinary. And that's exactly what happened about a week ago when I went to go check on my philodendron Jose Buono here and noticed all of these white little mites crawling all over the place, all over its leaves, all over its soil. And let me tell you, this was not my first encounter with soil mites. This was my now third. The first time I dealt with them was in 2020 during the pandemic. I was by myself in my apartment. We were under lockdown and I had COVID and I just could not move one bit. And I look over at my Millsbo cabinet inside my bedroom that I kept my rare plants in, and I just see these white little mites crawling all over the place. And immediately I just freak out, as one would do, as you would expect any plant parent to do. And I didn't know exactly what to do in that situation because I didn't know what they were. I thought maybe it's like a spider mite or aphids or something like that because I was still unfamiliar with plant pests. I didn't know them as well. And so what I ended up doing is I ended up like tossing out a bunch of my rare plants because I was afraid that it was going to infect the rest of my plant environment here. And my one rule is that you have to sacrifice one plant to save the rest, right? If it comes down to it, especially even if it's a rare plant, it doesn't matter. I need to save the rest of these plants. And so I tossed out a bunch. I was able to take cuttings of some to restore, like my philodendron gigas over there. That one was like covered in soil mites, and I was only able to save a 2-leaf cutting. Now the thing is thriving and beautiful, but It took a while to get there. And let me tell you, again, I didn't know what those things were. I also didn't know what they were the second time around. Fortunately, I do have this one book that didn't really identify them as soil mites, but it did show a picture that looked similar, and it said to drop down the temperature in your apartment to like 55, 60 degrees, which, as you know, can be very deadly for tropical plants that need that warm air. And all this was happening, by the way, each time, all three times happened in the colder months. So I did that, and it did end up working, but I also let the soil dry out, and they were gone. Didn't have to deal with them anymore. They arrive again, same time as they did in the previous 2 years, or two situations, I should say. And I'm like, you know what? I need to do some research and look into these things. So soil mites are these annoying little pests. And like I said, they emerge when the soil is overly damp. And that's my fault. And that is because I have been watering my plants like it's still summer. And I need to cut back on watering them, even though the environment inside my apartment is decked out to be like summertime all year round for them with the grow lights, the humidity, the airflow, and all that stuff. Pests don't care. They don't care one bit. And so I need to really be cognizant of that. And that way my little baby here doesn't have to deal with it, because once I noticed them all over it, and I had it near other plants, I inspected them too. Fortunately, didn't find any on them. But I took Jose Bono here, moved him into the hallway, like the coldest, driest, dreariest part of my apartment. And I set up some grow lights around him, and I just let him sit there and let the soil dry out, and constantly monitored, saw that the soil mites were still all over the place. I mean, hundreds, if not what looked like thousands. And then I found a little thing called Diatomaceous earth, which is my new best friend. So I watched some YouTube videos on it, and how so many of our plant pests and other insects and crawling pests that go after plants are sort of immune after a while to certain other chemicals like a neem oil or hydrogen peroxide or rubbing alcohol, bleach, etc. And so that is the case with soil mites. In fact, the first time when I dealt with them, like I told you back in 2020, I tried putting neem oil on them, rubbing alcohol, hydrogen peroxide. Those things were still moving around. It did not faze them one bit. What Diatomaceous earth does, and why it's so awesome, is because it's made up of fossilized materials, natural, and it is safe for humans, safe for pets. You don't have to worry about it. In fact, when you touch it, even though you should wear gloves, when you touch it, it just feels like a nice soft powder. But let me tell you, when little pests or insects like I was about to call them our friends, but they are not our friends, the soil mites, touch it, what happens to them is that it feels like a million shards of shrapnel going into them, and it destroys their exoskeleton from the inside out, killing them all off, usually within 24 to 72 hours. So I ordered a bag of this. It was like $15, something like that, off of Amazon. Arrived the next day. I took it, put the powder on the soil where they were all clamming around, and then I decided to spray down the leaves with the powder as well, and I let the powder sit on the leaves for a couple of days, and I did not notice any soil mites anymore. I mean, literally after seeing what looked like thousands of those things crawling all over, they were just gone. So thank you, Diatomaceous earth. As I'm pouring it on there, by the way, I'm going all out like Cersei Lannister on them, on the soil mites. I'm like whispering to the Diatomaceous earth, start with their children, make it painful. I wanted them to suffer for what they did to my beautiful plant. They didn't really do anything to it because they don't cause really any harm to plants. In fact, they're actually doing a justice by breaking down biodegradable material that would otherwise just kind of sit there and grow mold and whatnot. But there is concern that they could be eating at like dead roots and then all of a sudden get into the roots that are alive, and so we don't want to deal with that. So it has been over a week now since I had applied the Diatomaceous earth. And what I'm going to do is, just to be safe, 100% safe, because soil mites tend to live under the uh, first top 2 to 3 inches of soil. And that's where they kind of like hover around, but they like to go all over the outside of the pot and the rest of the plant. Just to be safe, we are going to take this plant out of its pot and give it brand new soil. I'm going to give it a new moss pole, even though I love this moss pole. I'll let that thing sit in like rubbing alcohol and hydrogen peroxide for a couple of days and then let it dry out. And then I'll reuse it at some point. But we're going to give it a new moss pole. We're going to give it a new everything. And with that soil, my chunky aeroid soil mix, which I just made a fresh batch of, and did not include orchid bark. It's all set to go. So that's what we're going to do. And we're going to bring this baby back to its, back to its beautiful stance. And let me tell you, I am very much looking forward to getting it back in shape, because that there is a brand new leaf that unfurled while this whole process was going on. So I'm glad that I had those grow lights in the hallway with it. And I didn't want to unpot this plant and disrupt its roots or its growth while that new leaf was unfurling, because I just love its leaves. That's the beauty about Jose Bonos, is that they just have those speckled white variegation with them, and they're so pretty. But yeah, we're gonna go about doing this and get it done, taken care of, and take care of this baby once and for all. But first, yeah, I can't believe I forgot my scissors. If it's not one thing, it is another with me, and I am forgetful. So I'm gonna cut off this part of the twine here, where I had the mother leaf just kind of tied up to give it some support. This plant, by the way, was given to me by my buddy Todd over the Bronze Petal in Denver, and that was over a year ago, back in November in the year of our Lord 2022-ish, I believe. And I wanted one of these plants forever because they're so beautiful. And it started off with just this mother leaf and 2 other small leaves, and then it really started to balloon this past summer. And I want to continue to see it to grow. So what we're going to do is we're going to do what I said, and we are going to get rid of the soil, the moss pole. We're going to wash off the plant itself, all of its foliage. We're going to wash off its roots with a little bit of hydrogen peroxide mixed in with water, probably about 2 parts water, 1 part hydrogen peroxide. That'll actually stimulate growth in the roots too. By the way, with soil mites, I want to warn you guys, because if you're like me and just forgot to not water your plants as much during the colder months, one thing you should get in the habit of, that I am now starting to get in the habit of, is making sure that when I do wash and water my plants, when I water my plants, I always clean off their leaves at the same time. But I'm also going to start doing the same thing with their pots, because that is where the soil mites will start developing with the soil and start crawling all over the place. And for those of you who use terracotta pots, you need to be especially wary of this situation, because I'm sure if you use terracotta, you notice the white line buildup when you water your plants, especially if you use your tap water. That's just, most of the time, it's just the chemical buildup from, whatever's in our tap water, and it just kind of leaves that white line. But that is only part of the time. The other part, it could be a bacterial or fungal growth that is also growing on there, which will attract these soil mites, because obviously they want to go about and eat away at bacterial type stuff. So just a word of warning. Okay, we've got this out of there. And the crazy thing is that even though like it has been over a week since I had it in the hallway, and also I don't think I had watered it for maybe 5 days prior to this incident, the soil's still wet. So clearly I need to be more cognizant of that as well. Fortunately, with this new batch of chunky aeroid soil mix that I made, I put in a bunch of extra perlite, which will help with making the drainage a lot better and not leaving the soil as wet. It'll dry out faster, and that's what philodendron and other aeroids really love. And so, yes, we are going to take care of this with this sharp knife because it's like the only, I don't even know where my gardening tools are, like my little gardening shovels. And the last time I used this giant knife, I cut myself. I just didn't show it to you guys because I was embarrassed. So I'm going to be cautious. I need to be cautious, Kevin. But yeah, so I'm just chopping away right now at the soil. And that, my dear darling friends, will loosen everything up, allowing us to slip this plant out much easier. And hopefully this sharp knife is also, if there are any soil mites left in there, slicing away at them and making sure that if the diatomaceous earth didn't make their death painful and awful, that this knife is. And that is the revenge that I am seeking at this moment. Revenge is a terrible, terrible thing, and I am not a vengeful person, but when you mess with my plants, that is just going a little bit too far. And, you know, it's like messing with my babies, and oh, I do not like when that happens. You'll notice also that I'm using a giant box. Fortunately, I just got a new order of paper towels from Amazon. And so I'm doing this in a giant box. That way, all of this soil that could still have some soil mites in there somehow will just be tossed away afterwards, and we won't have to deal with it. So I feel like that's loose enough right now. And last time when I repotted this, because I did repot it over the summer because it outgrew its pot at that point, this thing had really beautiful long roots. And I want to be very careful because it has some aerial roots on the side. I don't want to disrupt those. Yeah, there we go. So maybe, yeah, there is a lot of orchid bark in there. Man, apparently I went overboard with the orchid bark. And maybe this pot was a little bit too large for it. I'm thinking so. Okay. Now that we have that part done, we can move on to shaking off this excess soil that is still built up here. And it's still got a really nice root system. I did notice that he did happen to chop off one root, a little root though, when I was moving around that knife in there. So guess what, soil mites? You got my plant again. Ha 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 ha. Frustrates me. And I'm curious to know in the comments below if you wouldn't mind telling me what is the plant pest that you deal with the most, because there are so many plant pests that we can deal with, and mine happens to be mealybugs every so often because the humidity is rather high. Keep it about 60% in my apartment, but the temperatures are cool, like around 68, 69 degrees Fahrenheit. But still, every so often I will see mealybugs on, usually like my philodendron mamii over here tends to be a target, or my Hoyas. But what are the pests that you folks deal with the most? I'm curious to know. And by the way, if you are a houseplant owner and you're thinking to yourself, oh, pests, he must not know how to take care of his plants. One, don't ever say that because I love my plants and I know how to take care of them. Two, you definitely have pests. I mean, whether or not you have one house plant or 100, you have plant pests. You just don't notice them because most plant pests are very microscopic. Like take, for instance, spider mites. You normally don't notice spider mites until it is too late. Spider mites, for instance, like to really suck the life out of plants, and they do that by creating these webs that go around, and usually you will only notice them once they have formed and created a web around your plant. And usually what they do is it's kind of like on the back side of a leaf and usually in between the middle part over here. And so at that point, you realize you have a full-on outbreak of spider mites. I dealt with them early on in my plant journey a couple of years back when I got an ivy plant that I absolutely love because it looks so beautiful. But then I noticed it was declining, and I'm like, I'm doing everything right. I don't know what's going on here. And then, lo and behold, there was webbing. And I tossed out that ivy plant, and I will never get an ivy again because They are spider mite magnets. I mean, I have other plants that are spider mite magnets as well, but I don't notice them ever really popping up on them. Like I have a philodendron verrucosum over there, and those things are spider mite magnets, but no, haven't really noticed it on there in years. And I do monitor that all the time. But yeah, I've been very fortunate, and I'm curious to know what your guys's are. But okay, we have a lot of the soil taken off of the roots, and I'm going to go wash this off with water and a little bit of hydrogen peroxide, and then we are going to move forward with repotting. Okie dokie artichokes. Now that she is completely showered off and I let her roots sit in a fine mixture of 2 parts water and 1 part hydrogen peroxide, we are ready to give her her new home. I initially bought this giant pot thinking that maybe that would be perfect for it, but I don't know. I kind of don't want to put it in a small pot because it grew so large out of the other one, but also this might be too large. Oh, the problems. I think what I'll do actually is maybe I'll put it in. I will put it in here, but I'll put a firm layer in. But also, I did mix in a lot of perlite in here too, so it's not like drainage is going to be like a big issue, you know? So I'm going to do that and get that in there. And it also has really great drainage on the bottom of it. As I have told you guys in my last videos, really love using clear plastic pots where you can see through so you can keep an eye on their root growth and all that stuff. But I couldn't find one that is large enough. So when I was at a plant shop just north of Denver over the weekend, I saw these, and I mean, they were like $5, so why not, you know? Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of Diatomaceous earth, which I have put in one of these little handy, what looks like a ketchup bottle, and this just makes it easier to kind of spray it around. So put that baby there. And what you'll notice, and I mean, this is just kind of clear knowledge for plant people, if even during the summer months, if you're repotting, is that there will be stunted growth in this plant for, you know, especially because we're here in the off season where they really don't experience a lot of growth to begin with. But I would say probably I won't see new growth in this for another 2 months or so. Even though the conditions in here, like these plants grow year round. I'm just gonna spread that around in there. We're gonna plop her in. The nice thing is that on this new beautiful variegated leaf that emerged this week is that there is a new growth point where a new leaf is coming out, though I imagine that that leaf will come out a little bit, maybe with some deformities, kind of like this one and this one. These two popped out when I was repotting before, so that would not surprise me one bit if that were to happen. Okay, so now that I have that in there, I need to now move over to the poles, and I've got some cocoa coir poles here, and I want this to go, arrow roots are right there, so I want it to go in an area that is going where they're going to be able to attach to it. Let me see. This is nice because I won't have to disrupt the roots by poking into it. I can already see like where this will attach perfectly. Okay, cool. So right about there is where I want to be, and that is a good place to be, my friends, although it might need a little bit more soil. So I'm going to take this and put some more under there for another little base layer. That'll give it plenty of room to grow. Once it decides to grow, it's been through a lot of trauma recently. We're not going to talk about the soil mites anymore, but this will help it out a lot. And I'm so glad that I'm finally having a chance to get around to this, because I really didn't want to leave this plant in those conditions, especially knowing that it really needed to be repotted and taken out of that soil, because I leave for upstate New York later on this week to go see my family for the holidays for a couple of days. And I was thinking to myself, well, maybe what I'll do is I'll just I'll just deal with it when I get back. I'll put it in an area where it'll be fine and all this stuff. And I have a plant sitter who's going to be here checking in my plants, and he's awesome. Pedro, he is like the best. My plants love him more than they love me. Every time that I come back from an extended period away and Pedro's taking care of my plants are always, they just seem so much healthier. And I'm like, what is he doing that I'm not? What can I do to make my plants happier? He just has like plant magic to him. And a great guy too. So, but yeah, I'm glad I'm taking care of this before going back home to New York to see my family. And I'll, know that this is taken care of. And while Pedro's here, he can always check in on it to make sure that everything's fine and dandy, like cotton candy. Okay, so I got a nice layer there. I just want to straighten out this moss pool a little bit, just a little bit. Probably put a stick in there too, just to kind of give it some stability, especially as I need to add in more poles eventually. I might throw in another one on top of it, and that's the nice thing too. And I've done videos on this before with moss poles and why they're so necessary for climbing philodendron, and monstera for that matter, because you want their leaves to get big and healthy, and in nature they climb up trees. So we're going to throw in one more moss pole right there and get that done. And yes, we, my friends, have successfully saved this plant from its soil mite infestation. Ah! What an awful pain in the butt thing to happen. And it's so freaking annoying because they're just so unsightly little pests. But it's not unsightly? This beautiful plant with its stunning variegation, and now we'll get to continue to see it grow. Since this plant has taken a shower and I have not, that's what I need to do next and clean up this mess. But I want to thank you guys so much for tuning into another one of my videos. And if you haven't already, please like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell so you can see more fun and interesting planty content just like this. And by the way, if you haven't already, please visit my brand new website, plantswithkevin.com, because that's where you'll find so many plant care articles and urban jungle DIY designs that I do here in my flat in downtown Denver, Colorado. And also, if you do click on this article related to this situation that we dealt with, and you're unfamiliar with plant pests, I'm going to have a breakdown on there of plant pests and what you need to look out for, and also how you go about treating them and dealing with them, because it's always important to stay ahead of the plant pest game. So thanks again, guys, and I will see you in the next video.